The Alaskan wind howled outside Dr. Michael Brennan's office in Frosthaven, a remote research outpost perched on the edge of Koyuk Glacier, where the Arctic's icy grip held sway. It was January 2025, and at 60, Mike's weathered face bore the lines of 3 decades studying Alaska's frozen secrets. His German shepherd, Kodiak, lay by the wood stove, ears twitching as snow pelted the window. Mike's desk was a chaos of satellite images, each one a grainy puzzle that had turned his world upside down. A military scan had picked up a metallic anomaly deep in the glacier, 200 feet of ice entombing what could only be Flight AE-17. The passenger plane lost on Christmas Eve 1976. 150 souls vanished. No wreckage, no signal, just a 40-year mystery that haunted every Alaskan researcher. Until now. Mike traced the anomaly's outline, a tail fin, tilted at 40 degrees, unmistakable against the ice's blue veins. His heart raced, memories of his father, a pilot who'd searched for AE-17, flooding back. "We're close, Dad," he whispered, voice rough. Kodiak's low growl snapped him alert. "Doctor." Emily Chen, his 30-year-old research assistant, burst through the door, her black hair dusted with snow, eyes wide with excitement. "Mike, the thermal scans just came in," she said, spreading printouts on the desk. "It's not just a plane, it's intact. And there's something else." Mike leaned in, squinting at the scans. Heat signatures, faint but consistent, dotted the ice around the wreckage. "Animals?" he asked, frowning. Emily shook her head. "Too deliberate. Look at the patterns, circular like they're circling the site." Mike's gut twisted. Koyuk Glacier was no place for wildlife, not at -40. He grabbed his radio. "Get me Dr. Laura Bennett at Wildlife Services," he said, voice steady despite the chill creeping up his spine. "And call Captain Ben Larson. We're going in." Within hours, Frosthaven buzzed with preparations. Laura Bennett, a 65-year-old wildlife biologist with a reputation for decoding Alaska's predators, arrived by chopper, her silver braid tucked under a parka. Ben Larson, a grizzled 55-year-old ice pilot, landed his twin-engine plane, his eyes sharp with memories of AE-17's failed searches. "My old man flew those missions," Ben said, clapping Mike's shoulder. "Never thought I'd see this day." Mike nodded, Kodiak's warmth at his side grounding him. "None of us did," he said, but the heat signatures gnawed at him. What was out there? The team's convoy rolled out at dawn, a caravan of snowcats crawling across the glacier's treacherous expanse. Mike rode up front with Laura, Kodiak's nose pressed to the window, growling softly. The Koyuk Glacier stretched endless, its ice fields cracked and unforgiving. The anomaly site 80 miles northeast. Laura studied the scans, her voice low. "These patterns, they're not random," she said, tracing the circular trails. "Bobcats, maybe, but this behavior, circling, guarding, it's unheard of." Mike's jaw tightened. "Guarding what?" he asked, the question hanging heavy. Halfway to the site, Laura's shout stopped the convoy. "Pull over," she called, pointing to a patch of snow. Mike signaled a halt, stepping into the biting wind. Kodiak bounded out, sniffing the snow, his hackles up. Laura knelt, her gloved hand brushing the surface. "Look," she said, revealing tracks, large, padded, unmistakably feline. A bobcat, but bigger than any Mike had seen, its prints deliberate, circling a hidden ice crevasse. "She saved us," Laura said, awe in her voice. "This could have swallowed the snowcat," Mike's breath caught. "She?" Laura nodded, pointing to smaller tracks nearby. "A mother." "With cubs." Kodiak's bark shattered the silence, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Mike followed, his binoculars catching a glint. Eyes, golden and unblinking, watching from a ridge. A bobcat, massive, her spotted coat blending with the ice, flanked by two nearly grown cubs. Aurora, Mike's mind named her, her stare piercing. "They're not scared," he said, voice low. Laura's eyes narrowed. "They're not fleeing, they're waiting." Kodiak's growl deepened, sensing something Mike couldn't. Then the twist hit like a rogue wave. Mike's radio crackled, a distorted signal breaking through, a voice, faint, repeating, "AE-17. Help." The team froze, eyes wide. "That's impossible," Emily whispered, her face pale. "The plane's been down 40 years. Mike's hands shook, the voice chillingly human, yet warped, like it came from the ice itself. Kodiak's hackles rose, his bark urgent, pointing to the anomaly site. Laura's voice was grim. "Something's alive out there," she said. "And it's been waiting for us." Mike clutched the scans, Aurora's eyes burning into him. Flight AE-17 wasn't just a wreck. It was a secret, guarded by creatures who knew more than they should, and Mike was about to uncover a truth that would shake the world. Frosthaven, Alaska, was a speck of stubborn humanity carved into the edge of Koyuk Glacier, where the Arctic's relentless cold tested every soul who dared call it home. In the dim glow of a January 2025 morning, Dr. Michael Brennan sat in the outpost's cramped briefing room, the air thick with the scent of coffee and anticipation. At 60, Mike's gray hair and weathered hands told a story of decades battling Alaska's wilderness, but nothing had prepared him for the satellite anomaly that promised to unearth Flight AE-17, lost since Christmas Eve 1976. Kodiak, his German shepherd, lay at his feet, ears twitching, sensing the tension. The distorted radio signal from the ice. AE-17. Help. Still haunted Mike, a ghostly plea from a plane silent for 40 years. The room buzzed with the team Mike had assembled. Dr. Laura Bennett, a 65-year-old wildlife biologist with silver hair and piercing eyes, studied topographic maps, her expertise in Alaskan predators unmatched. Dr. Emily Chen, a 30-year-old glaciologist, tapped at her laptop, her sharp mind already dissecting ice core data. Captain Ben Larson, a 55-year-old ice pilot with a grizzled beard, leaned against the wall, his weathered face etched with memories of his father's failed searches for AE-17. "This ain't just a plane," Ben said, voice low, breaking the silence. "It's a ghost. My old man never stopped looking." Mike nodded, his throat tight. "Mine neither," he said, his father's pilot logs a weight in his memory. "But we're gonna find it." Laura looked up from the maps, her voice calm but firm. "Those bobcat tracks, mother and cubs, they're not random," she said, pointing to a satellite image of circular patterns around the anomaly. "They're guarding something, Mike. I've seen predators mark territory, but this? It's deliberate." Emily's fingers paused on her keyboard, her eyes wide. "Guarding a plane? For 40 years? Laura's gaze was steady. "Stranger things have happened in Alaska. Nature's got a long memory." Kodiak's low growl punctuated her words, his nose twitching toward the window where snow swirled in the -40 chill. Mike's mind raced. The bobcat, Aurora and her cubs, Dusk and Dawn, had saved their convoy from an ice crevasse yesterday, their tracks a map through the glacier's dangers. But the radio signal, human yet warped, suggested something alive in the ice, something impossible. "We need answers," Mike said, standing, his voice carrying the weight of his father's unfulfilled quest. "Laura, you're on the bobcats. Emily, cross-reference the heat signatures with ice flow data. Ben, get the choppers ready. We move tomorrow." The door swung open, a blast of frigid air ushering in a stranger, a woman in a sleek parka, her blonde hair tucked under a fur-lined hood. "Dr. Brennan, she said, her voice clipped, professional. Claire Hudson, Arctic Research Consortium. I'm your liaison for the NSF funding. Mike's brow furrowed. The National Science Foundation hadn't mentioned a liaison, but Claire's credentials checked out, her handshake firm. Welcome aboard, he said, wary. Kodiak's growl deepened, his eyes fixed on Claire, hackles up. Easy, boy, Mike murmured, but the dog's unease mirrored his own. Claire's smile was polished, but her eyes darted to the satellite images on the table. Flight AE-17, she said, tracing the tail fin's outline. A historic find, but those heat signatures concerning, don't you think? Laura's gaze sharpened. Concerning how? She asked, her tone cool. Claire shrugged, too casual. Wildlife, maybe, or equipment interference. You're sure it's the plane? Mike's gut twisted. Her question felt like a probe. We're sure, he said, voice flat. Thermal scans don't lie. The briefing wrapped, but Claire lingered, her presence a splinter in Mike's focus. As the team dispersed, Emily pulled Mike aside, her voice low. Mike, I ran the signal's frequency, she said, handing him a printout. It's not just old, it's encrypted military grade. From 1976. Mike's heart skipped. Military, AE-17, was a passenger flight. Emily's eyes were grim. Was it? I found an old NSF memo. AE-17 carried cargo. Unspecified, high security. Kodiak's growl echoed, his nose pointed outside, where Aurora's silhouette flickered against the snow, her cubs trailing. Then the twist hit like a crack in the ice. Mike's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Stop digging, Brennan. Some secrets stay buried. Attached was a grainy photo of the convoy, taken hours ago, Aurora's eyes glinting in the frame. Mike's blood ran cold. Someone was watching, and Claire's arrival felt too convenient. Emily, lock down the scans, he said, voice trembling with rage. No one outside this room sees 'em. He knelt by Kodiak, his whisper fierce. We're in deep, boy, but we're finding that plane. Aurora's distant howl pierced the night, a warning or a call, and Mike knew the truth in the ice was no simple wreck, and Nightfang's shadow was closer than he feared. The Koyuk Glacier stretched like a frozen sea under the pale January sun, its jagged ice fields glinting with menace. Dr. Michael Brennan stood at the edge of the excavation site, 80 miles northeast of Frosthaven, Alaska, his breath fogging in the -40 air. At 60, Mike's gray hair peeked from his parka hood, his weathered face set with determination. Kodiak, his German shepherd, paced beside him, black and tan fur bristling, ears pinned at the eerie silence. The team had set up base camp, a cluster of reinforced tents and thermal drills, within sight of Flight AE-17's tail fin, a ghostly relic protruding from the ice. The satellite anomaly that pinpointed the lost 1976 plane had sparked hope, but the cryptic radio signal, AE-17, help, and a threatening text, stop digging, Brennan, had turned Mike's mission into a race against an unseen enemy. Aurora, the bobcat mother, watched from a ridge, her cubs, dusk and dawn, trailing her, their golden eyes unnervingly steady. Dr. Laura Bennett, the 65-year-old wildlife biologist, knelt nearby, sketching Aurora's tracks in the snow. These patterns are deliberate, she said, her silver braid swaying as she pointed to circular trails around the site. They're marking safe paths, Mike. Bobcats don't do this without reason. Dr. Emily Chen, the 30-year-old glaciologist, adjusted her thermal scanner, her face tense. The heat signatures are stronger today, she said, showing Mike the screen. They're circling the fuselage like they're guarding it. Captain Ben Larson, The 55-year-old ice pilot chewed his lip, his grizzled beard flecked with frost. "My dad said AE-17 went down in a freak storm," he said, voice low. "No survivors, they thought. But those tracks, something's off." Mike's gut churned. The encrypted signal Emily had traced, military grade from a passenger flight, hinted at a cover-up, and Claire Hudson, the Arctic Research Consortium liaison, felt like a plant. Her polished questions at the briefing yesterday had set Kodiak growling, and Mike didn't trust her. "We need inside that plane," he said, voice steady despite the dread. "Laura, keep eyes on the Bobcats. Emily, scan for structural weak points. Ben, prep the drills." The team nodded, but Kodiak's sudden bark stopped them cold, his gaze fixed on the ice. Mike followed, his flashlight catching a glint. A frozen leather satchel, half buried, 20 yards from the tail fin. Kodiak sniffed, growling as Mike pried it free, the ice cracking like gunfire. Inside was a diary, its pages brittle but legible, stamped with AE-17 crew. Mike's hands shook as he read aloud. December 25th, 1976. 22 survivors. Colds killing us. Strange cats outside, bringing rabbits watching. Not predators. Guardians. Laura's eyes widened. "Guardians?" she said, voice hushed. "They were feeding the survivors?" Emily's scanner beeped, her voice urgent. "Mike, there's a void under the fuselage, big, like a chamber. Something's preserved down there." Before Mike could respond, Aurora's low growl echoed from the ridge, her cubs crouching, eyes locked on the camp's perimeter. Kodiak's hackles rose, his bark sharp, pointing to a snowbank. "Everyone down!" Mike shouted, diving behind a tent. A figure in a white parka emerged, rifle raised. A man, face obscured by a balaclava, his jacket bearing a faint crescent logo. Nightfang. "Drop the diary, Brennan!" he yelled, firing a warning shot that kicked up ice. The team scattered, Laura pulling Emily to cover, Ben grabbing a flare gun. Kodiak lunged, teeth bared, but the man sidestepped, aiming at Mike. "Stop!" Claire Hudson's voice cut through, her blonde hair whipping as she stepped from a snowcat, pistol drawn. "Lower your weapon!" The man hesitated, then bolted, vanishing into the blizzard. Mike's heart pounded, Claire's sudden heroics clashing with his distrust. "You okay?" she asked, holstering her gun, her eyes scanning the diary in Mike's hand. "Yeah," Mike said, voice tight, Kodiak's growl unwavering. "Thanks, Claire." "But how'd you know he was there?" Claire's smile was thin. "Saw movement on the perimeter cams," she said, too smooth. Laura's gaze sharpened, but she said nothing. The team regrouped, the diary's weight heavy in Mike's hands. "This changes everything," he said, voice trembling. "Survivors lived, maybe weeks." "And the Bobcats, they helped them." Ben's face was grim. "My dad's search missed them," he said, voice cracking. "They were right here, fighting to live." Emily's scanner beeped again, her voice urgent. "Mike, the void's active. Heat spikes like something's moving." Kodiak's bark turned frantic, pointing to the tail fin, where Aurora now stood, her cubs pacing, as if urging the team closer. Then, the twist hit like a crack in the ice. Mike's radio crackled, the same distorted voice from before. AE-17. They're still here. But this time, it wasn't warped. It was clear, female, and chillingly close, coming from the ice below. Laura's face paled. "That's not a recording," she said, voice shaking. "Something's alive down there." Kodiak's howl joined Aurora's, a chorus of warning as the ice groaned, a faint tremor shaking the camp. Mike clutched the diary, his father's voice echoing. "Find them, son." "We're going in," he said, tears stinging his eyes. Whatever's in that plane, it's been waiting 40 years, and Nightfang'll kill to keep it buried. Aurora's eyes met his, ancient and knowing, and Mike knew the Bobcats weren't just guardians. They were witnesses to a truth that would stun the world. The Koyuk Glacier was a frozen labyrinth, its ice fields glinting under a gray Alaskan dawn, the air so cold it burned. Dr. Michael Brennan stood at the heart of the excavation site, his parka barely shielding him from the -42 chill. At 60, Mike's gray eyes were sharp with resolve, but the weight of Flight AE-17's mystery pressed heavy. Kodiak, his German shepherd, growled low, black and tan fur bristling as he paced near the plane's tail fin, a jagged relic protruding from the ice. The satellite anomaly had led them here, 80 miles from Frosthaven. But the discoveries, a survivor's diary, a distorted radio signal, AE-17, help. And Aurora, the Bobcat mother, guiding them with her cubs, dusk and dawn, had turned hope into dread. Yesterday's attack by a Nightfang operative, thwarted by Claire Hudson's sudden intervention, confirmed it. Someone wanted AE-17's secrets buried, and they'd kill to keep them. Dr. Laura Bennett, the 65-year-old wildlife biologist, scanned the horizon, her silver braid tucked under a wool cap. "Aurora's out there," she said, nodding to fresh bobcat tracks circling the site. "She's watching, Mike. Those cubs are learning her paths." Dr. Emily Chen, the 30-year-old glaciologist, calibrated a ground-penetrating radar, her face pale. "The void under the fuselage is stable," she said, voice tense. "But those heat spikes, they're moving like something's alive." Captain Ben Larson, the 55-year-old ice pilot, gripped a thermal drill, his grizzled beard flecked with frost. "My dad swore AE-17 carried more than passengers," he said, voice low. "Cargo, maybe military. This ain't no simple crash." Mike's hand tightened on the diary, its words haunting. Cats outside. Guardians. The Bobcats had fed survivors, a bond defying nature, but the encrypted signal in Nightfang's threat, "Stop digging, Brennan," hinted at a deeper truth. Claire Hudson, the Arctic Research Consortium liaison, stood nearby, her blonde hair hidden under a parka, her polished demeanor jarring against the team's grit. Mike didn't trust her, not after Kodiak's growls and her too-perfect timing. "Let's breach the fuselage," he said, voice steady. "Emily, map the void. Laura, track the Bobcats. Ben, fire up the drills." The team moved, drills whining as they carved into the ice. Kodiak's bark cut through, his nose pointed to a snowbank. Mike's flashlight caught a glint, a metal canister, half buried, marked NF-76. "Nightfang," he muttered, prying it open. Inside, vials of a clear liquid labeled Project Aegis glowed faintly, alongside a manifest. AE-17, cargo, experimental serum, classified. Mike's heart sank. "This wasn't a passenger flight," he said, voice trembling. "It was a test run." Laura's eyes widened. "A serum? For what?" Emily's radar beeped, her voice urgent. "Mike, the void's shifting. Something's breaking free." Before Mike could respond, an explosion rocked the site, a fireball erupting from a drill rig. Shrapnel flew, and Mike dove, shielding Emily as ice splintered. Kodiak lunged, barking frantically, as screams filled the air. Ben staggered from the wreckage, blood on his face. "Sabotage!" he shouted, pointing to a figure in white sprinting across the ice. A Nightfang operative, rifle slung. Laura grabbed a flare gun, firing a red streak into the sky. "They're here!" she yelled, her voice raw. Aurora's roar split the chaos, the Bobcat charging from a ridge, her cubs trailing. She tackled the operative, claws raking, buying the team seconds. Mike scrambled to his feet, pistol drawn, but Claire's voice stopped him cold. "Drop it, Brennan." She stood on a snowcat, her pistol aimed, not at the operative, but at Mike. Her parka sleeve slipped, revealing a crescent logo. Night Fang. Mike's world tilted, betrayal cutting deep. "Claire," he choked, Kodiak's growl a thunder at his side. "You're one of 'em?" Claire's smile was ice. "The serum's worth billions, Mike," she said, her voice sharp. "Aegis enhances. Soldiers, animals, whatever pays. AE-17 was the first trial, and you're digging up our future." Laura's voice was fierce, tears in her eyes. "You played us, used us," Claire shrugged, pistol steady. "Science needs funding, Laura. Night Fang's got deep pockets." Ben's flare gun clicked, empty, his voice raw. "My dad died searching for that plane, you traitor." Claire's eyes narrowed. "Then he died for nothing." Kodiak's lunge broke the standoff, slamming into Claire, her pistol flying. Mike tackled her, pinning her wrists, but the operative fired, a bullet grazing Mike's shoulder. Pain seared, but Aurora's roar echoed, her cubs circling, driving the operative back. Emily's scanner screamed, the ice cracking under the fuselage. "It's collapsing," she shouted, dragging Ben to safety. Laura fired a second flare, its light bathing the chaos. Kodiak stood over Claire, snarling, as Mike zip-tied her hands, his voice trembling with rage. "You're done, Claire. Whatever's in that plane, it's coming out." The ice groaned, a fissure splitting the sight, revealing a glimpse of AE-17's fuselage, intact, frozen, a time capsule of 1976. Aurora stood atop it, her cubs at her side, eyes locked on Mike, as if urging him forward. The diary's words burned. Guardians. Watching. Mike's tears fell, his father's voice echoing. "Find them." "We're close," he said, voice breaking, blood dripping into the snow. But the twist deepened as the radio crackled again, the female voice clearer. "They're alive. Help." It came from the void, not the plane, a living plea from the ice. Laura's face paled. "That's not human," she whispered, tears streaming. "Something's been down there all this time." Mike clutched the manifest, Night Fang's serum, a ticking bomb, and knew the Bobcats weren't just guarding a wreck. They were guarding a secret that could rewrite history. The Koyuk Glacier was a frozen wasteland, its jagged ice fields shimmering under a weak Alaskan sun, the air slicing like a blade at -45. Dr. Michael Brennan crouched in a reinforced tent at the excavation site, 80 miles from Frost Haven, his shoulder throbbing from a Night Fang operative's bullet graze. At 60, Mike's gray hair was matted with sweat beneath his parka, his face etched with resolve despite the chaos of yesterday's sabotage. Kodiak, his German shepherd, lay beside him, black and tan fur ruffled, ears pinned at the distant howl of Aurora, the bobcat mother, whose tracks had saved them again. Flight AE-17's tail fin loomed outside, a ghostly relic of 1976, but the survivor's diary, cats, guardians, and a chilling radio voice from the ice, "They're alive," had turned Mike's mission into a descent into the unknown. Claire Hudson, the Night Fang traitor, was under guard, but her words, "Aegis enhances, billions," and the serum vials labeled Project Aegis haunted Mike. This wasn't just a plane crash, it was a conspiracy. Dr. Laura Bennett, the 65-year-old wildlife biologist, pored over Aurora's tracks on a tablet, her silver braid glinting in the tent's lantern light. "These bobcats aren't just territorial," she said, voice low, pointing to layered patterns. "Their paths are generational, Mike. 40 years of circling this wreck." Dr. Emily Chen, the 30-year-old glaciologist, hunched over a radar console, her face pale. "The void's active," she said, showing a screen with pulsing heat signatures. "Something's moving down there, and it's not mechanical." Captain Ben Larson, the 55-year-old ice pilot, cleaned his flare gun, his grizzled beard shadowing his scowl. "My dad warned me AE-17 was no ordinary flight," he said, voice rough. "Military cargo," he said. Looks like he was right. Mike's hand gripped the diary, its pages brittle but searing. "Survivors fed by bobcats, a bond beyond reason. The Project Aegis manifest, experimental serum classified, suggested AE-17 was a test, and the voice from the void, clear and female, wasn't a ghost." Something lived in the ice. "We need to breach that void," Mike said, standing, his shoulders screaming. "Laura, map the bobcats' paths." "Emily, stabilize the ice. Ben, check the perimeter." Kodiak's growl punctuated his words, his nose twitching toward the tent flap, where Aurora's silhouette flickered against the snow, her cubs, dusk and dawn, trailing. Laura's tablet beeped, her voice urgent. "Mike, the tracks. They're layered, like grooves in the ice," she said, showing a 3D model. "Generations of bobcats, walking the same route since '76. Emily's radar flashed, her eyes wide. "The void's 30 feet down, but the ice is cracking fast." Ben's flare gun clicked, his voice raw. "My dad's team missed survivors," he said, tears glinting. "I ain't missing this." Mike's throat tightened, his father's pilot logs a weight in his memory. "We won't," he said, voice breaking. "For them." Kodiak's bark shattered the tension, his paws scrabbling at the tent floor. Mike rushed outside, pistol drawn, the team following. The glacier was silent, too silent, until Aurora's roar split the air, her cubs crouching on a ridge, eyes locked on a snowbank. "There!" Laura shouted, pointing to fresh tracks, not bobcat but human, circling the camp. Kodiak's nose hit the snow, growling, unearthing a hidden device, a motion sensor wired with a Nightfang logo. "They're tracking us," Mike said, voice trembling with rage, crushing the device under his boot. Emily's radar screamed, the ice shuddering beneath them. "It's collapsing!" she yelled, grabbing her gear. A fissure split the sight, steam rising as the void's edge cracked open, revealing a glimpse of AE-17's fuselage, intact, frozen, its windows dark. Kodiak's bark turned frantic, pointing to the ice, where a faint glow pulsed, not mechanical but organic. Laura's face paled. "That's no machine," she said, voice shaking. "It's alive." Ben's flare gun trembled, his voice raw. "My dad. He knew something was wrong. We gotta get in there." Before Mike could act, a gunshot rang out, the bullet kicking up ice inches from Kodiak. 3 figures in white parkas emerged, rifles raised, Nightfang logos glinting. "Drop the diary, Brennan," their leader shouted, a woman with a scar across her cheek, not Claire. Mike's heart raced, but Aurora's roar answered, the bobcat charging, her cubs scattering the operatives. Kodiak lunged, tackling one, as Mike fired, clipping another's arm. "Get to the void!" he shouted, shoving Emily toward the fissure. Laura fired a flare, its red light bathing the chaos, while Ben dragged a wounded operative to cover. The twist hit like a glacier's collapse. As Mike reached the fissure, a metallic clank echoed from the void, not the plane, but something else. His flashlight caught a glint, a steel capsule half buried marked Aegis Trial 2. Inside, preserved in ice, were vials, but not just serum, syringes used with traces of blood. Human blood. Emily's scanner beeped, her voice a whisper. "Mike, the heat signatures, they're human-shaped, down there." Mike's tears froze on his cheeks, the diary's words searing. "Guardians, watching." "They didn't all die," he said, voice breaking. "Some survived, and Nightfang left them." Aurora's howl pierced the fray, her cubs guiding the team through the cracking ice, as if pleading for the void's secrets. The operatives regrouped, their leader's voice a snarl. "Burn it all!" Gasoline splashed, flames licking the snow. Mike clutched the capsule, Kodiak's strength his anchor. "We're going in," he said, tears streaming, his father's voice roaring. "Find them." Night Fang's fire roared, but Aurora's gaze held Mike's, ancient and fierce, a vow that the Bobcat's vigil and the survivor's truth would not be silenced. The Koyuk Glacier was a frozen hell, its ice fields splintered and smoldering under a slate-gray Alaskan sky. Flames from Night Fang's gasoline licked the snow, casting eerie shadows across the excavation site, 80 miles from Frosthaven. Dr. Michael Brennan staggered through the chaos, his parka torn, blood seeping from a bullet graze on his shoulder. At 60, Mike's gray eyes burned with defiance, the weight of Flight AE-17's secrets fueling him. Kodiak, his German shepherd, limped beside him, black and tan fur, singed, growling at the Night Fang operatives retreating into the blizzard. The survivor's diary, cats, guardians, and a steel capsule marked Aegis Trial 2, containing used syringes with human blood, confirmed a horrifying truth. AE-17 wasn't just a crash, it was a test site for Night Fang's Project Aegis, and something or someone still lived in the ice's void. Aurora, the bobcat mother, stood atop the fissured ice, her cubs, dusk and dawn, pacing, their golden eyes urging Mike forward. Dr. Laura Bennett, the 65-year-old wildlife biologist, clutched her tablet, her silver braid frayed as she shielded Dr. Emily Chen, the 30-year-old glaciologist, from the fire's heat. "Aurora's tracks are our way in," Laura said, voice steady despite the gunfire echoing. "They've mapped this ice for decades." Emily's radar flickered, her face pale. "The void's collapsing," she said, voice trembling. "Those heat signatures, human-shaped, are moving faster." Captain Ben Larson, the 55-year-old ice pilot, reloaded his flare gun, blood streaking his grizzled beard from a shrapnel cut. "My dad knew AE-17 was dirty," he said, voice raw. "Military experiments," he said. "We're close, Mike." Mike's hand gripped the capsule, its syringes glinting like accusations. The diary's words, bobcats feeding survivors, and the radio voice. "They're alive," suggested AE-17's passengers hadn't all perished. Night Fang's attack, led by a scarred woman and betrayed by Claire Hudson, aimed to bury that truth. "We're breaching the void," Mike said, voice hoarse, pain searing his shoulder. "Laura, guide us with the tracks. Emily, stabilize the ice." "Ben, signal the feds." Kodiak's bark was fierce, his loyalty unwavering, as Aurora's howl answered, a primal call through the storm. The team moved, weaving through Aurora's safe paths, her cubs darting ahead like sentinels. The fissure gaped wider, steam rising from the void, AE-17's fuselage glinting below. Intact, a frozen tomb. Emily's radar screamed, her voice urgent. "The ice is shifting, 10 minutes before it caves." Laura's tablet mapped the bobcat's grooves, etched over 40 years. "They've been circling this spot," she said, tears in her eyes. "Like they knew we'd come." Ben's flare gun fired, a red streak piercing the blizzard, his voice breaking. "My dad. He'd be here, Mike. For them." Kodiak's growl snapped Mike's focus, his nose pointing to a snowbank. Mike's flashlight caught a glint, a hidden camera, Night Fang's crescent logo etched on its lens. "They're still watching," he said, smashing it, rage boiling. Emily's scanner beeped, revealing a new heat signature, closer, inside the camp. "Someone's here," she whispered, her breath fogging. Laura's eyes widened, tracking Aurora, who froze, growling at a tent. "It's not an operative," she said, voice shaking. It's different. Mike signaled Kodiak, creeping toward the tent, pistol drawn. The flap rustled, and a figure stumbled out. A man, gaunt in tattered 1970s clothing, his eyes wild, skin frostbitten but alive. "You found us," he rasped, collapsing. Mike's heart stopped, the diary's words roaring. "Guardians. Watching." "Who are you?" he demanded, kneeling, tears stinging. The man's voice was a whisper. "Daniel, AE-17. We survived. They kept us." Kodiak's whine was soft, nudging the man as Aurora's cubs circled, protective. "Daniel?" Laura choked, tears streaming. "You're a survivor?" Daniel nodded, shivering, his eyes darting to the ice. "The cats brought food, hit us. Night Fang. They came back." Emily's radar flashed, her voice frantic. "Mike, the void's spiking. More signatures like his." Ben's flare gun trembled, his voice raw. "My dad was right. They were alive." Mike's mind reeled. Night Fang hadn't just abandoned AE-17. They'd returned, experimenting on survivors, and the Bobcats had shielded them. The twist hit like an avalanche. Daniel's hand clutched a vial, identical to Aegis Trial 2, but marked Subject D-17. "They changed us," he whispered, his eyes glowing faintly, unnatural. "The serum. It's in us." Mike's tears froze, the radio voice, female, alive, echoing from the void. "You're not alone," he said, voice breaking, helping Daniel stand. Laura's voice was fierce. "Night Fang knew survivors lived," she said, tears falling. "They've been covering it up for decades." Gunfire erupted, Night Fang operatives regrouping, their scarred leader shouting, "Burn the void!" Gasoline splashed, flames roaring toward the fissure. Mike dragged Daniel to cover, Kodiak snarling, Aurora's roar rallying her cubs. "We're going in!" Mike yelled, his shoulder bleeding, his father's voice thundering. "Find them!" Emily stabilized the ice, Laura mapped the path, and Ben fired another flare, signaling the feds. The void loomed, its secrets pulsing, guarded by bobcats who defied time. Mike's tears mixed with blood, Kodiak's loyalty his strength, Aurora's gaze a vow. Night Fang's fire burned, but the truth, human, alive, altered, waited below, and Mike would face it no matter the cost. The Koyuk Glacier was a frozen inferno, its ice fields fractured and blazing under the pale January sky, flames from Night Fang's gasoline roaring across the excavation site. Dr. Michael Brennan staggered through the chaos, 80 miles from Frosthaven, Alaska, his parka soaked with blood from a bullet graze on his shoulder. At 60, Mike's gray hair clung to his sweat-streaked face, but his eyes burned with resolve. Kodiak, his German shepherd, limped beside him, black and tan fur singed, growling at the Night Fang operatives advancing through the smoke. Flight AE-17's fuselage loomed in the fissure, a 1976 time capsule, but the survivor's diary. Cats. Guardians. And Daniel, the frostbitten man who'd stumbled from the ice, claiming Project Aegis had changed him, turned Mike's mission into a nightmare. Aurora, the bobcat mother, roared from the ridge, her cubs, dusk and dawn, circling, their golden eyes a beacon in the blizzard. The void's heat signatures, human-shaped, alive, pulsed below, and Night Fang would burn it all to keep them hidden. Dr. Laura Bennett, the 65-year-old wildlife biologist, shielded Daniel, her silver braid frayed, tears streaking her face. "He's one of them," she said, voice trembling, checking his pulse. 40 years, Mike. How's he alive?" Dr. Emily Chen, the 30-year-old glaciologist, clutched her radar, its screen flashing wildly. "The void's caving in," she said, voice cracking. "Those signatures, they're converging, like they're waiting." Captain Ben Larson, the 55-year-old ice pilot, fired a flare into the sky, blood dripping from a shrapnel wound, his grizzled beard shadowing his anguish. "My dad knew AE-17 was wrong," he said, voice raw. "Military tests," he said. "They left him here to die." Mike's hand gripped the Aegis Trial 2 capsule, its used syringes, human blood, Daniel's blood, a chilling proof of Nightfang's experiments. The diary's account of bobcats feeding survivors, the radio voice, "They're alive." And Daniel's glowing eyes suggested a truth too monstrous to grasp. Nightfang had tested Aegis on AE-17's passengers, enhancing them, and some had survived, hidden by the ice and guarded by Aurora's lineage. Claire Hudson, Nightfang's traitor, was cuffed in a snowcat, but the scarred operative, their leader, was still out there, her gasoline fueling the inferno. "We're going into the void," Mike said, voice hoarse, pain searing his shoulder. "Laura, keep Daniel safe." "Emily, guide us. Ben, signal the feds." Kodiak's bark was fierce, pointing to Aurora's tracks, etched grooves leading to the fissure's edge. The bobcat mother stood atop the ice, her cubs pacing as if pleading for the team to follow. Laura's tablet mapped their paths, her voice urgent. "These grooves are 40 years old," she said, tears falling. "Generations, Mike, protecting them." Emily's radar beeped, her eyes wide. "The void's 20 feet down, but it's unstable. 5 minutes before collapse." Ben's flare gun clicked, his voice breaking. "My dad's search failed him," he said, tears glinting. "I won't." Mike's throat tightened, his father's pilot logs a vow in his heart. "We're bringing him home," he said, tears freezing on his cheeks. The team descended, roped together, Aurora's tracks guiding them through cracking ice. Kodiak led, his nose sniffing the steam, growling at shadows in the void. The fuselage gleamed below, its hull intact, windows dark. Emily's flashlight caught a glint, a hatch, half open, leading to the void. "That's it," she whispered, her breath fogging. Laura's voice was soft, awed. "The bobcats knew. They've been circling this hatch." Mike's hand brushed the diary, its words searing. "Not alone. Guardians." Daniel's whisper echoed. "They changed us." Gunfire erupted above, Nightfang's scarred leader shouting, "Seal the void!" Bullets ricocheted, ice splintering. Mike's radio crackled. "Feds, 10 minutes out." But 10 minutes was a lifetime. Kodiak's bark turned frantic, pointing to the hatch as Aurora's roar answered, her cubs scattering operatives topside. "Move!" Mike yelled, shoving Emily through the hatch, Laura and Daniel following. Ben fired another flare, its light fading in the blizzard, his voice raw. "Go, Mike!" "For my dad." Mike dove in, Kodiak at his side, the ice groaning above. The void was a cavern, AE-17's fuselage a frozen shrine, its seats filled with personal effects, dolls, letters, coffee cups, all preserved. But the heat signatures pulsed deeper in a sealed compartment. Mike pried it open, his shoulders screaming, revealing a chamber, steel, clinical, with cryogenic pods, 6 of them glowing faintly. Inside, figures, human, alive, their eyes open, glowing like Daniel's. "My God," Laura choked, tears streaming. "They're enhanced." Emily's radar fell silent, her voice a sob. "Nightfang left them, experimented on them." The twist hit like a seismic shock. One pod's occupant, a woman, her face etched with 1976 features, spoke, her voice the radio's. "You found us." Her eyes glowed, her body preserved but altered, Aegis in her veins. "They made us," she said, tears falling. cats saved us." Mike's sobs tore free, the diary's truth alive before him. "Who?" he demanded, voice breaking. "Who did this?" Her gaze was ancient, pained. "Nightfang. And him." She pointed to the void's edge, where Ben Larson stood, flare gun lowered, his face a mask of guilt. "Ben?" Mike choked, tears streaming, Kodiak's growl thunderous. Ben's voice was raw, tears falling. "I was on AE-17, Mike. A pilot, enhanced, survived. Nightfang. They forced me to hide it, threatened my family." Laura's voice was fierce, tears in her eyes. "You knew they were here?" Ben nodded, sobbing. "I tried to stop them. I led you here, didn't I?" Emily's voice broke. "You betrayed us!" Ben's flare gun trembled, his voice a plea. "I'm sorry. I had no choice." Aurora's roar shook the cavern, her cubs leaping through the hatch, driving back, an operative climbing down. Mike clutched the pod, the woman's hand reaching through the ice, her voice soft. "The cats. They're our family." Kodiak's warmth steadied Mike, his tears mixing with blood. "We're getting you out," he said, voice raw. Night Fang's flames roared above, but Aurora's vigil, Ben's betrayal, and the survivors' glowing eyes fueled Mike's fight. The feds were close, but the void was collapsing, and Mike would face the truth, no matter the cost. For his father, for AE-17, for the bobcats who'd never stopped guarding. The Koyuk Glacier was a frozen battlefield, its ice fields splintered and scorched under a relentless Alaskan blizzard, the air biting at -50. Dr. Michael Brennan stood in the void beneath Flight AE-17's fuselage, 80 miles from Frosthaven, his parka drenched in blood from a bullet graze on his shoulder. At 60, Mike's gray eyes blazed with defiance, his breath ragged but unyielding. Kodiak, his German shepherd, growled beside him, black and tan fur matted with ice, his limp a testament to their fight. The cavern glowed faintly from 6 cryogenic pods, each holding a survivor, enhanced by Nightfang's Project Aegis serum, their eyes glowing, alive after 40 years. The survivor's diary, cats, guardians, and Daniel, the frostbitten man who'd emerged, confirmed AE-17 was no crash, but a test site. Aurora, the bobcat mother, roared above. Her cubs, dusk and dawn, battling Nightfang operatives, their tracks guiding the team through the collapsing ice. Ben Larson, the ice pilot who'd betrayed them, stood at the void's edge, his flare gun lowered, tears streaming as he confessed. A survivor of AE-17, coerced by Nightfang to hide the truth. Dr. Laura Bennett, the 65-year-old wildlife biologist, supported Daniel, her silver braid frayed, tears freezing on her cheeks. "They're alive, Mike," she said, voice trembling, checking a pod's occupant. A woman, her 1976 features preserved, her voice the radio's plea. "They're alive." Dr. Emily Chen, the 30-year-old glaciologist, gripped her radar, its screen flickering as the void shook. "The ice is caving," she said, voice cracking. 3 minutes before we're buried," Captain Ben Larson, 55, sobbed, his grizzled beard shadowing his guilt. "I didn't want this," he said, voice raw. "Nightfang. They had my son. I led you here to stop 'em." Mike's hand clutched the Aegis Trial 2 capsule, its used syringes, human blood enhanced proof of Nightfang's experiments. The diary's tale of bobcats feeding survivors, the pod's glowing occupants, and Ben's betrayal painted a monstrous truth. Nightfang had tested Aegis on AE-17's passengers, creating superhumans, and the Bobcats had guarded them for decades. Claire Hudson, Nightfang's cuffed traitor, was topside, but the scarred operative, their leader, was closing in, her gasoline fueling the inferno above. "We're getting him out," Mike said, voice hoarse, pain searing his shoulder. "Laura, stabilize Daniel. Emily, open the pods. Ben, help or get out." Kodiak's bark echoed, his nose pointing to the hatch where Aurora's roar answered, her cubs scattering operatives in the blizzard. Laura hooked Daniel to an oxygen mask, her voice fierce. "He's hypothermic, but his vitals, they're enhanced," she said, tears falling. "Nightfang made him more than human," Emily's tools whirred, prying a pod seal, the woman inside gasping, her glowing eyes locking on Mike. "You came," she whispered, tears streaming, her voice the radio's. "The cats, they saved us." Mike's sobs tore free, his father's pilot logs a vow. "Find them." "We're here now," he said, voice breaking. "You're going home." The void shuddered, ice cracking like thunder. Emily's radar screamed, her voice frantic. "The collapse is accelerating." Ben's flare gun clicked, empty, his voice a plea. "Mike, I flew AE-17, he said, tears falling. "I was test subject 1. They enhanced me, hid me. I'm sorry." Laura's voice was raw, tears in her eyes. "You left them here?" Ben nodded, sobbing. "I had no choice. My son." Mike's rage surged, but the woman's hand gripped his, her voice soft. "He tried. The cats. They chose us." Kodiak's whine softened, nudging Ben as if sensing his pain. Gunfire erupted topside, the scarred operative's voice a snarl. "Bury them!" Bullets ricocheted, ice splintering. Aurora's roar shook the cavern, her cubs leaping through the hatch, claws raking operatives. Mike's radio crackled. Feds 5 minutes out, but the void was collapsing, debris raining down. "Open the pods," Mike yelled, helping Emily, his shoulders screaming. Each seal hissed, revealing survivors, men, women, their 1976 clothes tattered, eyes glowing, bodies preserved, but altered. "They're us," Emily choked, tears streaming, as a man in a pod reached out, his voice a sob. "Thank you." The twist hit like a glacial quake. The scarred operative dropped through the hatch, rifle raised, but her face, unmasked, was Claire's sister, Ellen Hudson, Nightfang's true enforcer. "You thought Claire was the leak." Ellen laughed, her scar glinting. "She was my pawn, Brennan." "Aegis is ours, billions in enhanced soldiers. You're all collateral." Mike's heart stopped, Claire's betrayal a decoy. "Ellen?" Laura gasped, tears falling. "You ran this?" Ellen's pistol steadied. "Family business. Nightfang owns the future." Kodiak lunged, slamming into Ellen, her rifle clattering. Mike tackled her, pinning her, but the void shook, ice collapsing. Aurora's cubs darted through, guiding survivors to the hatch, their tracks a lifeline. Laura dragged Daniel. Emily helped the pod occupants, their enhanced strength eerie but human. Ben fired a final flare, its light piercing the blizzard, his voice a roar. "For my dad." Mike's tears mixed with blood, his shoulder failing, but Kodiak's strength held him. "We're not leaving him," he said, voice raw, shoving Ellen toward an agent climbing down. The feds breached, their choppers' roar muffled by the storm. Mike lifted the woman from the pod, her hand gripping his, her voice a whisper. "The cats. Their family." Aurora stood at the hatch, her cubs circling, eyes ancient, as if passing their vigil to Mike. The void groaned, ice crashing, But the survivors, 6, enhanced, alive, climbed with eerie grace, Kodiak leading. Ellen's screams faded as agents cuffed her, Night Fang's empire cracking. Mike's sobs shook him, his father's voice thundering, "You found them." The bobcat's roar echoed, a vow unbroken, but the void held one last secret, pulsing deeper, and Mike knew this wasn't the end. The Koyuk Glacier roared with the fury of a collapsing world, its ice fields fracturing under the weight of Night Fang's sabotage, flames licking the snow in a hellish glow. Dr. Michael Brennan climbed from the void beneath Flight AE-17's fuselage, 80 miles from Frost Haven, Alaska, his parka shredded, blood streaming from a bullet graze on his shoulder. At 60, Mike's gray hair clung to his sweat-soaked face, but his eyes burned with unyielding resolve. Kodiak, his German shepherd, staggered beside him, black and tan fur scorched, his limp a badge of their battle. 6 survivors, enhanced by Night Fang's Project Aegis serum, their eyes glowing with an eerie light, followed, their 1976 clothes tattered, bodies preserved in cryogenic pods for 40 years. Daniel, the frostbitten survivor, leaned on Dr. Laura Bennett, his whispered confession. "They changed us," echoing the diary's haunting truth. Cats, guardians. Aurora, the bobcat mother, led her cubs, dusk and dawn, through the blizzard, their golden eyes a lifeline as the ice crumbled. Night Fang's leader, Ellen Hudson, was cuffed by federal agents, her sister Claire's betrayal a decoy, but the void's final pulse hinted at one last secret, and Mike's heart pounded with dread. Dr. Laura Bennett, the 65-year-old wildlife biologist, supported a female survivor, her silver braid frayed, tears freezing on her cheeks. "They're human, Mike," she said, voice trembling, guiding the woman, whose glowing eyes mirrored Daniel's. "But Aegis, it's rewritten them." Dr. Emily Chen, the 30-year-old glaciologist, clutched her radar, its screen dead as the void collapsed behind them. "We got him out," she said, voice cracking, tears streaming. "But the ice, it's gone." Captain Ben Larson, the 55-year-old ice pilot and AE-17 survivor, helped a male survivor, his grizzled beard hiding his sobs. "I left him here," he said, voice raw. 40 years, Mike. I let him down." Mike's hand gripped the Aegis Trial 2 capsule, its used syringes, human blood, enhanced, a chilling testament to Night Fang's experiments. The diary's account of bobcats feeding survivors, the pod's living occupants, and Ben's coerced silence revealed a monstrous cover-up. AE-17 was a test for superhuman enhancement, and Night Fang had buried it, only for Aurora's lineage to guard the truth. Federal choppers roared overhead, their spotlights cutting through the storm, agents swarming to secure Ellen and her operatives. Kodiak's growl was steady, his loyalty Mike's anchor as Aurora's roar answered, her cubs circling the survivors, protective, as if claiming them as kin. "We're not safe yet," Mike said, voice hoarse, pain searing his shoulder as he scanned the blizzard. Ellen said, "Aegis was billions." Someone's still out there. Laura's eyes widened, tears falling. "The lab," she said, voice fierce. "Daniel mentioned it. Night Fang's facility, hidden nearby." Emily's hands shook, her voice a sob. "The chip in the capsule, it's got coordinates." Ben's flare gun was empty, his voice breaking. "My son. Night Fang's got him, Mike. I betrayed you to save him." Mike's heart twisted, tears stinging. "We'll find him, Ben," he said, gripping his shoulder. "For your dad, for mine." The woman from the pod, her name revealed as Sarah, clung to Mike, her glowing eyes human yet otherworldly. "The cats, "They fed us," she said, tears streaming, her voice the radio's plea. "They hid us from them." Mike's sobs tore free, his father's pilot logs a vow. "Find them." "You're free now," he said, voice raw, helping her toward a chopper. Kodiak's bark turned frantic, pointing to a snowbank where Aurora froze, growling at a glint. A hidden explosive, Night Fang's final trap, wired to detonate the site. "Run!" Mike shouted, shoving Sarah to Laura. Emily grabbed Daniel, Ben supporting another survivor, their enhanced strength eerie as they sprinted. Kodiak led, following Aurora's tracks, her cubs darting through the snow, guiding them to safety. The explosive ticked, seconds from ignition, as federal agents fired at Night Fang stragglers, their scarred leader, Ellen, screaming defiance from her cuffs. Laura's voice was a roar, tears in her eyes. "Mike, you're hurt! Get out!" Mike's shoulder burned, his vision blurring, but he dragged a male survivor, John, his glowing eyes pleading. "Don't leave us," John said, voice breaking. "Not again." The twist hit like a glacial surge. As Mike reached the chopper, a new figure emerged from the blizzard. A man, 70, in a tailored coat, his face unscarred but cold, Night Fang's true mastermind. "Brennan," he said, voice like ice, pistol raised. "Aegis is mine. The survivors, the serum, all of it." Mike's blood ran cold, recognizing him. Dr. Victor Klein, a 1976 NSF scientist presumed dead, now Night Fang's architect. Laura gasped, tears streaming. "Klein! You who started this?" Klein's smile was venom. "I built the future. Enhanced humans, perfect soldiers. AE-17 was my prototype, and you've ruined it." Kodiak lunged, slamming into Klein, his pistol flying. Mike tackled him, pain blinding, but Aurora's roar echoed, her cubs charging, claws raking Klein's guards. The explosive detonated, a fireball engulfing the fissure, AE-17's fuselage vanishing in a cascade of ice. Mike's heart shattered, but the survivors were safe, their glowing eyes locked on Aurora, who stood defiant, her cubs at her side. Emily's voice was a sob. "The chip! It's still got the lab's location!" Ben grabbed Klein's radio, shouting to the feds. "Take him! He's Night Fang's head!" Agents swarmed, cuffing Klein, his cold eyes burning into Mike. "You'll never stop us!" he spat, but Sarah's hand gripped Mike's, her voice fierce. "You already have." Mike's tears fell, his father's voice thundering. "You found them." Kodiak's warmth steadied him, Aurora's gaze ancient, a vow unbroken. The chopper lifted, survivors aboard, their enhanced forms a living legacy of AE-17's horror. Laura's voice was soft, tears falling. "The Bobcats, their family." Emily hugged Daniel, sobbing. "We did it, Mike." Ben's hand found Mike's, his voice raw. "For our dads." The glacier burned below, but the lab's coordinates pulsed in the chip. Night Fang's final secret. Mike's sobs shook him. Kodiak's loyalty, his strength, Aurora's roar fading as the chopper climbed. The survivors' glowing eyes held hope, their bond with the Bobcats a miracle in the ice. Mike knew the fight wasn't over, but they'd won this battle, and the world would know the truth, thanks to the Guardians who'd never stopped watching. Summer light bathed the Koyuk Glacier, its once menacing ice fields now softened by patches of green moss, a rare warmth touching the Alaskan wilderness. Dr. Michael Brennan stood on a windswept ridge overlooking the Frosthaven Research Outpost, 80 miles away, his parka swapped for a lightweight jacket, the scars on his shoulder a faint reminder of last winter's battle. At 60, Mike's gray hair caught the breeze, his weathered face lit with a quiet peace he hadn't known in decades. Kodiak, his German shepherd, sat at his side, black and tan fur gleaming, his limp barely noticeable, tail thumping softly. Below, the AE-17 sanctuary opened its gates, a sprawling complex of research labs and wildlife habitats, honoring Flight AE-17 survivors and the bobcats who'd guarded them for 40 years. Aurora, the bobcat mother, prowled a nearby enclosure with her cubs, dusk and dawn, their golden eyes watching the crowd, a living legacy of compassion etched in the ice. 6 months had passed since the Void's collapse, since Mike's team, Dr. Laura Bennett, Dr. Emily Chen, and Captain Ben Larson, faced Night Fang's wrath to rescue 6 enhanced survivors, their bodies altered by the Project Aegis serum. The diary's truth. Cats, guardians, and the survivors' glowing eyes had stunned the world, exposing Night Fang's 1976 experiments. Ellen Hudson and Dr. Victor Klein, Night Fang's masterminds, were in federal custody, their labs, uncovered via Daisy's microchip, dismantled. Ben's son, held hostage, was safe, and Claire Hudson, the traitor, faced trial. But the Bobcats' vigil, a 40-year bond with AE-17's lost, was the story that captured hearts, a testament to nature's grace in the Arctic's desolation. Mike gazed at the sanctuary's centerpiece, a stone monument inscribed, "For the 150 souls of Flight AE-17, December 24, 1976, and their Bobcat guardians who taught us compassion knows no bounds." Laura, 65, her silver braid now loose, joined him, her eyes soft. "We did it, Mike," she said, voice warm, tears glinting. "The survivors. They're healing." Emily, 30, approached, her tablet replaced by a camera, snapping photos of the crowd. "The world's watching," she said, voice bright, tears in her eyes. "This place, it's hope." Ben, 55, stood with his son Caleb, 20, his grizzled beard hiding a smile. "My dad's resting now," he said, voice thick, gripping Mike's shoulder. "Thanks to you." The survivors, Sarah, Daniel, John, and 3 others, stood near the monument, their glowing eyes dimming as ages faded, their strength human again. Sarah, the woman whose radio plea, "They're alive," had haunted Mike, held his hand, her 1976 stewardess uniform replaced by a modern coat. "You gave us a future," she said, tears streaming, her voice soft. "The cats, they were our family." Mike's throat tightened, his father's pilot logs a fulfilled vow. "You were never alone," he said, tears falling, Kodiak nudging her hand. Aurora's low purr echoed from the enclosure, her cubs playing, as if sensing the moment's weight. The sanctuary's opening ceremony began, Frosthaven's small community joined by global media, scientists, and native Alaskan elders whose lore had long whispered of guardian spirits in the ice. Laura took the stage, her voice carrying over the wind. "This is the AE-17 sanctuary," she said, tears glinting. "For the survivors, the Bobcats, and the bond that defied time. They showed us compassion isn't just human, it's universal." The crowd cheered, but Mike's eyes were on Aurora, her gaze ancient, a bridge between wild and human. A twist unfolded as Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady. "I have one more story," she said, holding a second diary, smaller, hidden in her pod. "My sister, Julie, she wrote this." The crowd hushed, tears flowing, as Sarah read, January 12, 1977. "I'm the last. The cats bring rabbits, sit with me. They know I'm leaving, but they stay. Tell the world we weren't alone." Mike's sobs tore free, the diary a final gift revealing Julie's death, but also her peace guarded by the bobcats. Laura's voice broke, tears streaming. Julie, she's why they stayed. Emily hugged Sarah, sobbing. They loved you. The elders unveiled a new exhibit, a bobcat habitat funded by Nightfang's seized assets, where Aurora, Dusk, and Dawn would live as ambassadors, teaching the world their story. Daniel, his frostbitten face healing, spoke, his voice raw. The cats. They're our kin. This sanctuary's theirs, too. The crowd roared, Kodiak's bark joining Aurora's purr, a chorus of unity. Ben's son, Caleb, approached Mike, tears in his eyes. Dad told me everything, he said, voice thick. You saved him, Doctor. Brennan, saved us. Mike gripped his hand, tears falling. Your dad's a hero, kid. So are you. A final twist came as an elder, Tala, revealed a native Alaskan artifact, a 1976 carving found near the crash, depicting a bobcat mother and cubs etched with guardians. Our people knew, Tala said, her voice resonant, tears glinting. The cats were chosen long before the plane fell. Mike's heart swelled, tears streaming, the carving proof of a bond older than AE-17. They chose us too, he said, voice raw, hugging Sarah, the survivor's glowing eyes now soft, human. The ceremony ended with a drone display, images of Aurora's tracks glowing in the sky, the crowd awestruck. Mike stood with Laura, Emily, and Ben, Kodiak at his feet, the survivors beside them, the bobcats watching from their habitat. We found him, Dad, Mike whispered, tears falling, his father's pilot logs at peace. Laura's hand found his, her voice soft. You gave him a home, Mike. Emily's camera clicked, her voice a sob. The world'll never forget. Ben hugged Caleb, tears streaming. We did right. The sanctuary's gates opened, visitors streaming in, learning AE-17's story, tragedy, survival, and the bobcat's vigil. Mike knelt by Kodiak, tears falling. You're my hero, boy, he said, voice thick, Aurora's purr echoing. The survivors, now free, stood with the team, their bond with the bobcats a miracle etched in ice. The world had changed, Nightfang's darkness exposed, but the light of compassion, human, animal, eternal, shone brighter. This isn't just a story of survival, it's about loyalty, courage, and the mysterious bonds that tie us to the wild. Flight AE-17 survivors and their bobcat guardians showed us that even in the darkest ice, compassion can thrive across decades, across species. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share it with someone who believes in miracles. Tell us in the comments, what's your story of compassion that changed you? Join our community because in Frosthaven and everywhere, the tracks of kindness never fade. Thank you for being part of this journey. Note: this is a fictional story crafted for entertainment and inspiration.